All right, guys, welcome back. This is lucky number 13. I got one of my good buddies here, Logan Nelson, who is a big fan of mental toughness like myself. He's a closer on one of the bigger wholesaling teams in SubTo. So, Logan, why don't you just kick us off? Tell us kind of who you are, how you got here, and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I'm Logan. I'm a closer on, like Adam said, one of the larger teams inside of SubTo, with SubTo Drew, SubTo Lou, and then KJ and Joseph Mudd as well. Um, I'm 21. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 12. I guess, do you want the long story on why I'm here, or do you want the short story on why I'm here?
Go for it, bro. We got all the time in the world. Let's go.
Okay. So, long story on why I'm here is because I started buying and reselling stuff on eBay from like thrift stores and garage sales back whenever I was in middle school. Like literally, like my first jump into entrepreneurship started whenever my mom was just taking me home from karate practice one day. She was like, "Hey, I saw this cool thing on Facebook where people are like buying stuff from thrift stores and they're selling it on, eBay for, like $20 profit or $30 profit or whatever." And so, me just being a 12-year-old, I'm just like, "Oh, cool." Like that's neat. She's like, "Do you want to try this?" And I'm like, "Oh, I mean, I don't got anything to lose. I might as well give this thing a shot." And that was essentially my first intro into entrepreneurship, and I fell in love with it. I literally remember, like, I'd gone to a garage sale and I found like these little like DS games. I'm pretty sure it was like Mario Kart for like the original Nintendo DS. I came back on a Saturday. I got home, I took a picture of it on the table, and I just figured out how to list the thing, listed it on eBay, and then within like 3 days it sold. And by the time that I paid like shipping and fees and considered the cost of how much I got off of the sale, I ended up making like $2. But I was just so stoked. I remember that, just like freaking out whenever I saw that it actually sold on my phone, because I'm like, oh, like this is real. Like you can make money online. Like this is crazy. Um, and so I guess after that, really, I was hooked. I was basically like the 12-year-old version of Gary Vee, like going and just harassing people at garage sales um, for a while. And I continued doing that through middle school, continued doing it through high school. That was kind of my gig to make money. I've only had one job, and that was just at the tennis center that I was working at, because I played tennis in high school as well. And then I eventually carried it over into college, and it had gotten to the point where like I was like storing stuff in the garage. I had like a whole like shipping station and all this other stuff set up. So in college, obviously that stuff wouldn't fit in the dorm. So I ended up renting a storage unit, and that was like my office. Is I would go to the storage unit, drive up there, and then I had like all the stuff on the shelves. I had like my whole like process and how I would list stuff. But eventually I was just getting stuck, kind of like spinning my wheels on it, because I'd gotten pretty good at eBay. Like I knew what things to look for. I kind of like niched down into like electronics and video games because those things had the best margins. But eventually I was like, like this is a lot. I've got to drive 15 minutes back and forth from campus in the middle of the day. And then, I'm packaging 5 things. That's going to take 2 hours. Got to drop it off at the post office. Then I got to go find new stuff. And it's just me constantly spinning my wheels to not make that much money overall. So eventually one day I was like, okay, I got to find something different. And so I was going through and I had like seen like Ryan Pineda videos and like stuff that's like very basic on like what wholesaling was. So had a little bit of an inkling of, you know, how it was structured, but I wasn't sure how it actually worked. But I remember just like kind of being burnt out with it, going home for Christmas break, and like sitting down and go like, okay, like I really need to try to see if there's something else I want to do besides eBay, because this isn't going to be my long-term gig. And I ended up looking on the Meetup app, and I was like, okay, like real estate meetups near me. And I'm looking at it, and at the time I was in Fort Worth, and there happened to be a real estate meetup like in a couple weeks. And so I said, okay, shoot, I'm going to go ahead and sign up for this thing and just see what it's all about. I mean, worst case, it's a free meetup. Don't really have anything to lose. I go there. And, you know, they kind of explain like some stuff about wholesaling. They explain some stuff about like buy and hold and having rentals. It's like a little like 2 hour meetup in like a hotel conference room out in Dallas. But while they're going through it, they say, hey, you know, like, here's an example of this person that made money. You know, like the typical like slideshow of like, look at this, we helped this person make this much, all this other stuff. And they end up saying that they were going to have a 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 3 day masterclass. So literally, was that 36 hours worth of just real estate content for 3 days, and it was free as long as people were still wearing masks. And at the time that I was going there, Texas never really got that bad, but it was definitely on like the decline for whenever COVID was kind of like on its way out. So they were like, this is probably the last one we're going to do for free just because we wanted to offer it while times were kind of tough. And I was like, okay, shoot, what do I have to lose again? You know, 36 hours of my time. Let me see whenever this was. And so they give us the dates. And I'm looking at it, and it's like literally the last 3 days of my Christmas break before I have to go, you know, back to college. And so at the time, I had a buddy of mine that was doing real estate wholesale, or he was doing eBay flipping with me. Him and I were going to garage sales all around town, just, you know, college buddies on the weekend. And he had to fly through DFW in order to get over to East Texas where I was going to school. And I was like, Devin, like, let's try to just go to this real estate thing. It's free. It's 36 hours. Like, what do we got to lose? We can literally, you know, put all of our stuff into our car the night before and then drive over first day of class to get moved in on Monday. Like, we don't need to be there early. Like, let's just, you know, go to this thing because it's, you know, last one they're going to have. So we end up going there. Really, really cool, eye-opening experience. I didn't even realize how blessed I was to be able to go through this, but they went through literally every strategy you could imagine possible for acquiring like single family real estate. They went through wholesale, they went through fix and flip, they went through Burr, they also went through SubTo, they also went through seller finance, they also went through raising private money. They even had one that they started out with, which was like a house trade, where like somebody in the city wanted to move out into the country, somebody from the country wanted to move into the city, and they literally did a house trade and made money in between. I'm sure that's super rare, but that was just crazy that that, you know, has even happened. But really through all that experience, like I had no clue. I was a completely clueless 18-year-old going into this. Like I didn't know what earnest money was. I didn't know any of this. All I just remember was like they were talking and I was excited by how much money there was to be made. And I was like, oh, this is so crazy. Like you don't need to like have the money to start it out. You can just go find the money. You can go use other people's money. You can wholesale all this other stuff. And so like this is way better than eBay. Like literally it's just a higher priced item. I'll make more money on it, you know, selling something for hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than for like $100 if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
So me and my buddy were like, okay, you know, we're just gonna sit down, take some massive action, and just get after it. And we drove back to Longview. We're going through, and the university was already on like the sketchy side of town. Like Longview's a pretty small town, like maybe 100,000 people live there, and like university's just in the middle of the hood. And we're like, okay, you know, what are we gonna do now? And so I look up on the Meetup app again because that was the only thing I knew how to do. And lo and behold, that Monday, there's a real estate meetup in Longview. So we go to that real estate meetup. We end up, you know, meeting somebody who helped us kind of get our first wholesale deal. Eventually, after 4 months of like driving for dollars and doing this weird strategy that this dude taught on how to actually get houses, I can go into that later. Crazy strategy that I would never use myself. But after 4 months, I ended up getting my first deal. I was like, holy cow, this is so much money. I made $28,000 as a college kid. And I was like, this
Yeah.
is crazy. Like, this is how much money I've made all year. Like, what am I doing selling stuff on eBay? And eventually I was like, you know what? I like this entrepreneurship game way more than I like being an engineer and going through getting a college degree and all this other stuff. I said, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm just going to drop out. And, you know, I trust in me and I trust in my passion for entrepreneurship that I'm going to make this work. And that's what I did 2 years ago. Since then, I've still been doing real estate. been enjoying it. I'm a closer on a team right now. I literally joined SubTo like immediately after I got that got that check. I knew that was going to be my next purchase, but yeah, that's basically why I'm here now talking with you, Adam.
Yeah, and I still think it's wild. And you and I have talked about this privately, but like for you to even have something like this to join when when you're 18,
Hmm.
like I'm 31, so I got my first smartphone when I was 18. You know,
Right.
like all of this stuff like didn't even exist yet. And it's not really like better or worse. I know a lot of people that they're like, "Oh, I wish this stuff existed back then." And it's like, "Well, it exists now. Like what are you going to do with it now? How are you going to handle it today?" Um,
Yeah.
because too many people want to reminisce and, "Oh, well, you know, it would have been so great if this was around. Thinking about how much further I would be." Well, you're not. So what are you going to do about it today?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the things I love about you the most, Logan, is you really are focused on the today, the here, the now. Um, and not sitting there, with your arms crossed and pouting. Like
It's
it's what
easy
are we
to do.
doing today to make it. Yeah, well, it is easy to do, and that's always the easy way out. But the easy way out is the coward's way out.
Hmm.
You know, and you hold a higher standard for yourself. Whether that's doing the endurance sports that you talk about when on family night with Pace when he brings you up, or
Hmm.
going through the Live Hard program, which I can also appreciate having, not only attempted but completed 75 hard too. Like, I guess let's talk about that for a little bit, like, because that makes you a different person, and most people don't realize that. They're like, oh, I'm gonna try to do it. I'm gonna give it a shot. I'll do it, but I'm not gonna give up alcohol for 75 days. I can't live without
Hmm.
that. I don't think they realize that's part of the problem and why they should do it.
Right. No, exactly. 75 hard program has been good. I gotta say though, for me, the experience is probably not what it would be for a lot of people because I had already gone through and as I was getting into entrepreneurship, like around high school or college, I started like really going into like the, personal development side of it, going, okay, this is what I've got to do if I want to make more money. It's like I've got to really like be disciplined, I've got to have good habits, I really need to become a better person if I'm going to be capable of making this amount of money.
Hmm.
So same year I dropped out of college, I had done like this like 30-day challenge that was called like the Iron Mind 30. If you're familiar, do you know Rob Dial at all?
I know of him.
Okay. So like think like personal development 101, like super basic stuff just about like getting your mindset right. And that's, where I was and that's where everybody starts. There's nothing wrong with Rob Dial. But it was like you got to work out for 45 minutes a day. You've got to take a cold shower every day. You've got to read every day. You've got to journal every day. You got to meditate every day. And then it was like stick to a diet and no alcohol or anything like that. So I went through, decided to do that for 30 days with my girlfriend and a couple of other friends. And that was kind of like my intro into 75 hard. And I really saw the difference in that. That was really like my first like 75 hard experience whenever you're like, okay, like I'm committing to doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And that really helped. It showed me the value of, having a habit and keeping it. But eventually, I've been going through like still trying to like work on myself. I've ran a 30K, which is something else that we can go into. But really for me, 75 hard was the training for my 30K more so than it was I need to like make a change in my life. Like I was already kind of used to like the habit development. I knew that I needed to be consistent with them. I already had like a habit tracker that I was using. I wasn't consistent with the habits all these years because it's consistency is difficult, but I needed a little bit of a reboot and I really needed the 2 workouts a day in order to train for my 30K. So that's kind of where I started with it.
Yeah, I love that though. But I think the most important part about the consistency is what the consistency teaches you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you've never been consistent before, you're what I found for me personally was that I was a little bit of a people pleaser, right? Like I would just say yes to everything. If
Mm-hmm.
Logan was like, "Hey, I need you to drop everything you're doing," like, okay, I'm there. but it teaches you to say no because you realize that you have things that you need to do as opposed to saying yes and doing things with like this resentment and this these unspoken expectations because you're not keeping those promises you made to yourself that said that you were going to do the thing regardless of what came up.
Exactly. No, I was definitely the same way. You know, like I would say yes to anything. I'm always an open book, ready to go whenever. And I think just like flipping the script on that and realizing, you know, like the other side of the coin of like, it's not how much can you stack on your plate, it's like how much can you like take off and make sure that like the stuff that's on your plate is like only like the healthy like fruits and meats and vegetables and all the other stuff
Mhm.
rather than, you know, all the sweets and the extra stuff that you just want to add on. Um, that was really a huge mindset shift the first time I went through and did any type of program. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because like you said, so you're doing, but so you're not just doing the 75 hard though right now. You're doing the entire Live Hard program because you were telling me earlier this morning that you just finished phase two on Friday.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
so I just finished phase two. So for y'all who aren't familiar, like there's another step up after 75 hard. So you
oh, it's
have,
great.
yeah, there was three steps up, but
Mhm.
it's a year-long program called Live Hard. And essentially after you do 75 hard, 75 hard's habits is you've got to do two 45-minute workouts every single day. One of them has to be outdoors. You have to drink a gallon of water every day. You have to read 10 pages every day. Stick to a diet, no cheat meals, no alcohol, and you got to take a progress picture of yourself like for all the 75 days. That way you can kind of see the progression as it goes on. So after you complete that for 75 days, I did that last year in September, finished up like beginning of December. It gives you the option to continue with Live Hard, which is an entire year long program. And you go into, you can start literally phase one, is what the first part is called, right after 75 hard. And what phase one is it's all the habits from 75 hard. So the reading, the two workouts, the gallon, everything like that. Plus, you've got to take a cold shower every day. Plus, you've got to come up with three other habits that you're adding in every day. So for me, that was I wanted to track my bank account balance every day. That was something I got from Alex Ramosi. That's like, you know, instead of checking social media every day, check your bank account every day. And, you know,
Yep.
that will probably be a bigger motivator than social media.
Yep.
I wanted to journal every day. That was something that was really helpful and another habit that I need to get back into. I've lost that one since. And then what was the third one that I did? Um, shoot, it's been a minute. I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was stretching for 5 minutes every day because I was starting to get tight. But did that, you do phase one for 30 days. And then after you go through on phase one, there's a mandatory 30-day break minimum
Yep.
where you can't just use your momentum that you've gained through doing all the habits. You've got to actually like stop and you either keep your consistency, you keep your discipline, or you don't. And this is the part that Andy said was the toughest is that you're going to lose your momentum, you're going to get in your own head and all that other stuff. So for me, I'd gone through, I did 75 hard, finished up like December 1st. I said, okay, I don't want to do phase one during the holidays. I'm be traveling too much. I can just like start it in the new year. I'll have like the new year, you know, kind of kicking the butt to get the phase one going. So
Mhm.
I did 75 hard first try, no problem. I did phase one starting January 1st after already taking a 30-day break, you know, no problem. And then I get to phase two and I'm like, another 30-day break. It's only, so phase two is only the habits from 75 hard. So you're not doing the cold shower, you're not doing the three extra habits. It's literally just 75 hard, but not for 75 days, for
Yep.
30. So
Yep.
I'm like, okay, piece of cake. I got this in the bag. I did 75 hard on my first try, phase one on my first try. This is going to be nothing. I started phase two in March and I restarted phase two freaking 10 times. This is the only
Mhm.
time I restarted it. And going back through just because like I wasn't consistent with one thing. I didn't have the discipline one day. I wasn't feeling it and I was in my own head. From March, I tried to do it and a couple of spurts in April, I tried a few spurts in May, and I finally was like, okay, like this is gonna stick. I'm gonna do it this time. And I made it through. But I've learned a lot about myself just from that experience. Definitely like taking the hard stop, trying to build back your discipline from nothing, because I had just gone like straight down into not being very disciplined again.
Mm.
um it'll teach you a lot about yourself and teach you about like where your standards actually are. That was like the biggest thing it exposed, and it hurts, but sometimes the truth hurts.
Yeah, I had that experience too. I actually completed it in 21, and then when I went to go do 75 hard in 22, I did the same thing. I restarted. I basically did the program every single day for 180 days straight because I could not complete it
Nice.
to like save my life.
Uh-huh.
Like like you said though, it shows you where your standards are. It shows you what you're willing to allow and what you're willing to tolerate.
Hmm.
And it shows you kind of what you ultimately what you think about yourself too. It
Yeah,
exposes all that doubt, all that negativity that you deal with, like it bubbles it up so that way you can actually confront it and get rid of it.
exactly. No, and that was the biggest thing that changed for me um in between phase one and phase two, was the confrontation with these negative, aspects of myself. Because really what I noticed was like, okay, in between 75 hard and phase one, it was December, it was Christmas. I'm like, okay, I've got like permission to be off. Like nobody's really doing business. Everybody's eating like crap. Like I don't really eat, that bad. I'm like, if I have a few sweets here and there, like it doesn't really matter. I've got skinny boy metabolism, so I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so I went through, did it, like hop back on the horse for phase one. I'm like, okay, perfect. Like I'm like on top of the world. I'm really just grinding on my shit right now. Like this is great. I get like, okay, 30-day mandatory break. Like I just want to continue. Like I don't have to do phase one, but I'm just going to continue 75 hard and like keep doing the two workouts. Well, that didn't really happen in February. I ended up getting in my own head and realizing like, oh, like I'm self-sabotaging like crazy right now, because I don't have these habits that I have to stick to, because I know that I'm on a program every single day. And it really, really got to me. And I was getting frustrated with myself. And so I started doing like this whole like up and down type maneuver. And I'm like, I know I'm like the best version of myself on 75 hard. I know I can do this. But then like I get off of it and I'm like right back to like literally where I started before I did 75 hard. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where I say my experience is a little bit different with 75 hard, because it didn't necessarily turn me into another person. Like I already knew I was capable of the discipline, and this was just like taking it to the next level. But what it made me realize was that my baseline standard wasn't high enough. It wasn't really achieving a new high as much as it was like realizing the low that hasn't moved.
Yeah.
Because
And
my
you have
baseline's
to
been here
feel
and
it.
I've been constantly like just bouncing off of this thing, but it really hasn't gone up that much at all. Um, so really what helped me as we talk about this whole, negative entity thing, was like looking into like why this was happening, because it felt like just severe self-sabotage. I was like, this is just terrible. Like I know I'm working against myself right now. And I'm like, I know I can be disciplined. I know I can like sign up for the challenge, but then I get off of it and I don't really feel like a new person. Like what is happening here? So I was doing some research on YouTube. I'm a big, personal development junkie. And eventually I found a video where it was like, it had like this graph and it had like this green part that was up and then this red part that was low. And I'm like, oh, like that's exactly what I'm going through. And it was like a 2 hour video. And I'm like, I'm watching this.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically what the video went through was, this whole cycle and like why you self-sabotage. You'll be really disciplined, and you'll see this cycle show up in any part of your life. It could be that you make $10,000, but then you spend $10,000, and then you make another 10,000, and you spend 10,000, and so really, after you average out all the ups and downs as they go on to infinity, you're just averaging out to zero.
Yep.
Really, the only thing that matters in there is where you're averaging out to. It doesn't matter about the peak, and it doesn't matter about the valley. The valley, it's like what is where are you ending up? Doesn't matter how much money you make. It matters how much you actually keep. So I'm going through, I'm like, yeah, this is great. And so I'm going through, the dude's just making really good points about why this happens. And eventually he ends up saying that the reason why or the only reason to break out of this, constant cycle where you're, balancing out at zero, is to make the high that you created on that peak your new baseline. To where if you feel like you're getting below that baseline, like you're literally getting sick to your stomach. And the dude that's, making the video, he lives in Dubai. He's like saying, like, literally, if I'm not making $100,000 a month, like I get like sick to my stomach. It's like as pitiful as me having like $0 in my bank account. Like it's unacceptable. And you've really got to just use your own psychology against you, or not even against you. You're either going to have your psychology work for you, or you're going to have it work against you. And your body's going to be constantly trained to maintain homeostasis, to maintain something like consistent. And so it's just a matter of like, what standards are you willing to accept of yourself? And so in between, this whole like starting phase two, failing, having to start back over, I'm realizing like, okay, like I've really got to change like my level of standards and who I am. And the key to that, he said, was doing something called shadow work. Which are you familiar with shadow work at all?
Yeah, if you've ever read The Dark Side of Light Chasers, that was where I had first heard about it.
Dark Side of Light Chasers. What's that?
Debbie Ford wrote a book, and that's what she kind of explains. She explains it like the mind is like a castle. And so you have all these different rooms, but what most of us do is we lock all the rooms and we only go in like four of them.
Hmm.
Because there's like a whole bunch of doors we just don't even want to open. We don't want to look at. We don't want to know what's inside there. So we just repress it. Like we just send it down.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like your shadow self is all of the stuff that you're not able to like confront about yourself. It's like, the doors that you lock in your castle, or it's like, the garbage bin where you just take like a greasy pizza box and you just like shove it all down and you put more garbage on top. You take another pizza box and you shove it all down. But eventually, like you're gonna have too much stuff inside of that trash can to where it's gonna start, bubbling over. And these are all like your repressed emotions of like stuff that you don't like about yourself, stuff that like you know is holding you back, or like traumas that you have that you just aren't facing yet. But what the whole concept of shadow work is about is to realize like, okay, like I came out of the womb as a baby. I did not just come out screwed up. This is like little scars that I've, you know had as I've gone through life. And eventually there's this time to like let them heal, or there's times to just like take the trash can, empty it out and say, we're done with this, like we need to get more room for it. And those negative emotions and those negative parts of yourself are parts of yourself, whether you like it or not. There's still, doors and rooms inside of, the castle of your brain. It's still taking up square footage. You're not just going to take a wrecking ball and knock them out. Like that's not going to work. So the choice that you have with shadow work is, it's scary, but to take a look at those, darker aspects of yourself that you don't like, and, just the icky stuff, or like childhood traumas of like getting bullied, having people die or anything along those lines, and realizing that that version of yourself still has power and energy behind it. And you can either have that manifest itself in your reality as self sabotage, where that person, like for instance, like a hurt inner child that's been bullied, it's going to, sabotage you because you were told that you were never good enough or whatever. Or you could realize that, that inner child is really just looking for acceptance and acknowledgement from somebody, and you can give that acceptance and acknowledgement to them. And now you've kind of taken, that inner child that's like gonna throw a temper tantrum and mess up your life, and have it be there on your side to help you. And
Yep.
that has been my biggest takeaway through doing all of this, is just like another level of personal development, to where it's not just like these are the habits that I've got to do, but it's actually like, okay, I'm in a video game. This is the character that I'm trying to create to play the video game of life.
Yeah, Debbie Ford talks about it insofar as like the way she describes it is there's a little bit of the universe in all of us, right? But like it's in all of us. And so if you were called an asshole, like that might be true. You might be an asshole, but it's like, how did that serve you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's a fine line between like being an asshole and being assertive. And chances are
Yeah.
you probably had to be, borderline or even an asshole at some point or another just to stand up for yourself. So those are some of the things that she talks about. One of the things I really want to talk about with you too, switching gears a little bit, is like how all that kind of serves you in your role as a closer.
Hmm, that's a good question. I want to think about this one.
Because like you said, you bring all this stuff up, and I agree with you. Like, I didn't learn these lessons until I was probably at least like 27, right? Like 75 hard wasn't even created until 2019.
Hmm.
So I knew that things like consistency were important, but I didn't know how to do it. Um, so for you, like, because all of these are they're especially important in sales. Sales is such a peak and valley kind of role, and it doesn't matter what you're buying or what you're selling,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are as far as like how it's helped you continue to show up and be your best self, even when it doesn't always go your way.
No, that's a really good question. Um, the honest answer to that is that I'm still like so new to this whole concept of, like figuring out where this like negative thing I can somehow turn it into a positive thing, realize that like it's happening for me. Like it sounds easy to do, just whenever somebody's explaining it, but like actually like sitting down and doing the work and going like, how the hell does my dad dying whenever I'm 16 like positively contribute to my life? Like it's a tough thing to confront, and
Yeah.
I'm only 21. Like I can't imagine like what adults have to go through after you have like twice as much life experience and your trash can isn't just a little like office trash can, it's like an entire dumpster that you've got to go through. Like it's crazy. Um, but the biggest thing that I've, I guess, taken away from it is that it showed me that I'm acting more like a thermometer than I am like a thermostat. you
Mm,
know, you put a thermometer in a room, it'll adjust the room based on how hot and cold it is outside. It's going to go up and down, it's going to fluctuate all over the place based off of its environment. And that's not going to serve you well, especially in, the type of climate that we're in right now. It's not 2020. The market isn't going crazy. You can't just like lock up a whole bunch of deals at 90% of ARV and be able to still wholesale them because you got hedge funds that are buying above market value. Like those days are gone.
yeah.
There's an election that's getting already really, unpredictable at this point. We've got the market kind of doing what it's done for like the past couple of years. Interest rates have been up. Some of the creative deals that you're getting now are, higher interest rate. Like the market's just getting a little bit tougher. And this is the type of environment where there's so much uncertainty. Everything's going crazy. You know, for you just to be able to be a thermostat. Like you set it at 72 degrees, it gets a little bit hotter, you bring it down. It gets a little bit colder, you bring it up.
Yeah.
And that's been like my biggest takeaway from all of this is that I was caught up in the swings of like, I'm either feeling really good today or I'm not. And yes, I had the discipline to keep stuff going, but the feelings were still there. Like I could go through the motions, but it really was like my energy was following the way that I was still feeling. I wasn't disciplined in being able to maintain the same energy. And that's, I think, the most crucial thing in sales is how you show up. You can give two people the exact same script, right? Like I
Mhm.
can say, complete beginner in real estate, read these words, go through, talk to the agent this way, talk to the seller this way. I can give, an experienced pro, hey, read these words, talk to the agent this way. They could go through, read the exact same script. One of them's going to be able to close a deal. The other one isn't. Why is that? Like the words were the same. It's about your presence on the phone. It's about how you're showing up. And that's really what all this experience has shown me is that like I can be disciplined in my habits, but I'm not disciplined enough in my energy yet because I'm experiencing these swings where like, oh, like I'm either like on fire or like I'm not really like as hot as I was in like the last call or I was, like a week ago or anything like that. And it's because I'm
Yeah.
allowing my emotions to drag me around. So that's been my biggest takeaway is just discipline on like an energetic level and being able to be a thermostat.
Yeah, because that's incredibly important. And some of the greatest people of all time, like, MJ showed up and he played in the flu game, but the other
Yeah.
game that nobody talks about is MJ still showed up basically the day he found out his dad died.
Mm,
His dad was murdered, and he showed up and he played a game and he put 60 points on the board. Tony Dungy had done the same thing. There was, I want to say it was a Secretary of State back during like World War II. Same thing. Like he found out his wife in a tragic car crash, and nobody would have faulted those people had they walked off the stage and gone and curled up in a corner and cried.
mhm.
Nobody would have faulted them, but they knew that they had a job to do and they had a mission to be there for, and so they stayed in and they
That-
finished the job.
and that's the next level of discipline. It's not, showing up, checking the box. It's like, are you showing up the same way to check
Yeah,
the box?
regardless of what's going on, regardless of how up or down you feel, are
Hmm.
you showing up the same way that you could or you would otherwise?
Right. And it's like in sales, like the other person can, sense how like nervous or how, confident you are through the phone. Like we're all human. We all kind of have like that sixth sense, that bullshit detector inside of us. And it'll just come off. It's the way that, we all interact, whether you're face to face to somebody or, you're just talking to them through the phone. Um, it's there. Like there's no avoiding it. It's just the way our brains are wired.
Oh yeah, totally. There's no avoiding that level of detection. Like you said, you can if you're sick, people know when you call them on the phone that you're sick.
Hmm.
If you're feeling some type of way, they pick up on that immediately.
Right. Well,
So
yeah.
like what are you doing to temper that, right? Because I imagine like as a salesperson and as a closer, you still have X amount of calls you have to make every single day,
Hmm.
regardless.
Yeah. So really what I'm trying to do now just to temper it is just like it's gonna sound quirky, but just like meditate and breathe and realize like, okay, like I'm here now, but I can take like 10 minutes and just realize like, okay, like I'm here, like in myself, realize, like what I am, like calm down your mind. You're still here. And you've got to I'm still struggling with it. Like I haven't figured this out yet. This has been, like I said, like something just new that's dawned on me and like the next thing I've got to work on. But that's the way I'm dealing with it right now is just like emptying my brain or fixating on one certain emotion that I'm feeling, whether it's, anxiety or a lack of motivation or anything like that, in order to like just process it and allow like that emotion to like move through me. That way I can still show up, at the level that I need to.
Yeah, so let me ask you this then. For those people that are thinking about becoming a closer, what kind of work went into that, right? Because I imagine you probably didn't start out as a closer. You might start out as a cold caller.
Yeah. So I mean, it definitely started out with cold calling a whole bunch of leads and just a matter of getting comfortable talking to people on the phone. I will say, like, being a closer is not for everybody because I mean, even now I'm doubting my abilities as a closer just because I'm getting caught up in this swing. Like if you want to be successful and you want to make a lot of money in sales, whether it's real estate, whether it's selling a course, whether it's selling a yacht, it doesn't matter what you're selling. You've got to be a robot and just show up at that same level, be such a thermostat that nobody else can screw with you.
Yeah.
And you got to be some degree of crazy too to be like, okay, I'm going to get on the phone today and a whole bunch of people are going to call me no and I'm still going to be crazy enough to take the next call. Like you've got to have like something a little bit wrong with you if you really want to get into sales. And I think that's like the first thing I would say if somebody wanted to get into being a closer is like, are you willing to get kicked in the nuts over and over and over and over and smile? Because that's what it is. You're going to get told no. You're going to be cussed out. You're going to be all the things. Like I started off cold calling homeowners. Fuck off. I don't want to sell my house. No, no, no. Until you finally get the one, yes, like I'm willing to have a conversation. And even then, they might not like your offer and they're going to be, disengaged and say no. So, I mean, that's what it takes. I guess I kind of took that question a little bit of a different way. I'm sure you're asking like what the process was that I actually went through.
No, but that's good because I was gonna lead into the next part that I was gonna suggest is like again, if somebody's watching this right now and they've never structured an offer before, how do you do that?
So it's like somebody's first time, they just cold called a homeowner. They said like, yes, I'm ready to sell. Like, and you're like, oh shit, like I don't know what to offer them.
Exactly. I didn't think I was gonna get this far.
Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first thing you got to do is you hopefully some of your phone calls that you've made, you're calling people in your network. I think that's another part of sales that a lot of people don't realize is that you also got to be able to sell yourself, and selling yourself is networking. Um, so really in that case, I say like your best bet is to reach out to somebody, and you know, you shouldn't be on the phone with somebody about how much you should be offering them for their home if you haven't had, five other decent conversations with people who can help you once you get to that situation.
Right.
That's the biggest thing is you've got to have a network. You've got to have, your buyers lined up. You've got to understand like, okay, if I'm going to promise this person that I'm going to buy their house and I can pay them this amount of money, if you're starting out, you should have the buyer on the back end that said, yes, like I'm looking for houses in these areas in this price point. This is how I run my numbers. This is how I figure out if it's a deal for me or not. You've got to have at least one of those people in your back pocket where you can revert to them and go, hey, like, what do you think about this? I mean, whenever I was starting out wholesaling, I had one investor. His name was DeKalen out in Longview that I was pretty good friends with, and I would get stuff under contract. I would say, hey, like, what are you looking for? I already knew he was looking for like a flip and all this other stuff, or he was looking for, a rental. That was something to be like Section 8, low income, but still just being able to provide affordable housing. And so I know, like, okay, like I'm targeting these types of properties. I'm not going to worry about the lots. I'm not going to worry about anything else. And then I called him. I was like, hey, DeKalen, like, help me out. Like, I offer them this much. Like, is it a good deal or not? Or I'm about to offer them this much. Do you think that's a good deal or not? And that's somebody who you need to be able to rely on. And it comes down to, building a relationship. And a large part of building their relationship is showing them that you're the type of individual to show up consistently, to have the discipline, to tie it back into like the 75 hard stuff. The relationship comes from who you are more so than it is what you say. It's how you show up, it's your energy.
Okay, so they've had those conversations, right?
Mhm.
So now they're about to make the offer. Because you and I talked about this the other day. You sent me a property that we'll just say it was retail ready.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what do you think goes into those, right? What makes it like retail ready versus like I would maybe try to wholesale this to a landlord because it's rent ready, or this is a good price to lock it up for a flipper, right? Because these are all different buyers.
Yeah. I mean, really, it comes down to knowing your buyers. Like I've talked to people who work at hedge funds. They have an entirely different, way that they look at properties. Like I have one hedge fund that I've worked with where they say, hey, like our goal is just to get a whole bunch of properties. We're going to stabilize the rent. We're going to renovate them a little bit. And once we get like 10, 20, 50 of these, properties in a certain area, we're going to portfolio them out and sell it to, an investor who's like a chiropractor or a lawyer or a doctor in New York. That's an entirely different buyer, and they're going to run their numbers an entirely different way than a fix and flipper that's just like, hey, like I need something that's just distressed. I need to buy it cheap. That way I can put some money into it, put lipstick on a pig, and just throw it back on the market. Um, and I think really determining what the best exit strategy is for each property comes down to knowing the buyers that you're working with. If you're only working with fix and flip buyers, you got to realize like these are people that want to, fix up a house. If you give them something that's pretty and amazing, they're not going to want to buy it because unless it's like really, really discounted, and in which case they're just going to buy it and turn around and list it right back on the market. Those are going to be an entirely different buyer versus somebody that's, hey, like I'm going to, buy, refinance the property after I renovate it a little bit, and then I'm going to stick a Section 8 tenant into there. They're going to be more so worried about like, what does my cash flow look like? In which case you've got to learn like, oh, like what do DSCR products look like? How much, are they really going to be, being able to pull out on a refinance and being able to underwrite it in different ways. Um, and the best way to evaluate them is to have that buyer already in your network to be able to say, hey, like I'm looking for these types of deals. I want to show you that I'm, going to show up and and bring you opportunities, how are you running your numbers? Because at the end of the day, something that's beautiful and fixed up isn't going to be for a flipper. It's probably going to be for an end retail buyer.
Well, that, and then you brought up the DSCR, right? Like if you're
Mhm.
buying somebody's personal property, you don't have T12s. How are you
Yeah.
going to get a DSCR? You're going to have to actually stabilize it as a rental property first. So are you considering that, when you're locking these up? Like these are all things to think about. One of the things I've been telling people right now, like with the fix and flips, is they're going and they're getting properties that are literally too large, at too high of a ARV. So they see these numbers, right? And they see that like the ARV in theory is like 620, but the purchase price is like 420, and they're like, that's $200,000 that I could make off this
Mhm.
property. It's like, no, you can't. And they're like, what do you mean? Well, it's 5,000 square feet doing like lights, fixtures, and floors. Guess what? You're in 70 grand. And that's too high for you to even get a loan that you can command at your experience level because you're above 80% LTV.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it comes down to is sometimes you just got to make those mistakes too and just say, hey, like I screwed it up, and eventually you're going to get told like, hey, this doesn't work. It's an 80% LTV property. You're like, oh, what's LTV? Oh, it's loan to value. And then you go through and you learn something else. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to just showing up, making mistakes, and leaning on people. There's no way to do real estate by yourself. That was another mistake I made in the beginning was doing it by myself.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then. How did you find a team that you jived with, right? Because like there's more than enough teams out there. There's wholesale teams like Sharon who's in here, she teaches a lot of wholesalers. So how did you find a team that you fit well with?
That's a good question. I mean, it comes down to trial and error. Previous to this, I worked at um, an actual like wholesale company that wasn't in SubTo. I was an acquisitions manager for them. uh Essentially the story there, I always, everybody asks like, oh, like what's the story of your first deal, how'd you get your first deal? And I have like a pretty cool story for my first deal. Like I literally wholesaled it to the neighbor across the street. It was wild situation, but like everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's such a cool story, and I'm like, really the one that I've learned more for was the story of how I got my second deal. So it took me 4 months of getting into real estate, driving around the sketchy side of Longview. Eventually, I got my first deal, made 28 grand. I'm like, all right, I'm dropping out of college, and went through and I'm like, I'm going to do this myself. Like, I already know how to be an entrepreneur, all this other stuff. And I went through, made a whole bunch of mistakes, bought a whole bunch of dialers and systems and all this other shit that I didn't need. And I was like, oh, this is definitely a way more like big boy business model than, buying something for $5 at a garage sale and selling it online for, $50. So eventually I got to the point where I'm like, all right, I don't know everything. I need to drop my ego and I need to go join a team. So I ended up working for an actual company. And at the company, they had like a whole like Salesforce CRM. We were doing like Google PPC leads and direct mail leads where we'd mail them like a fake check and they would call in going like, hey, like I saw this fake check offer for my property. Like, is this actually what you're going to offer me? And then you've got to, kind of work through that situation in order to qualify it for an offer and eventually give them, a little bit less money than what's actually on the check because the check's just high enough to get like the right amount of people to call in. And I learned a lot through that job, but the biggest thing I learned there was that I won't sacrifice my peace for money because the boss there at that job was just a lunatic to say the least. Um, and would just like get really mad over small things, blow them way out of proportion. We felt really micromanaged, like just we were on like Zoom every day and like he was like watching us like make calls that way we could like make sure that we were working, like just not like the right environment that I wanted to be in. And eventually that drove me to quit. I could have stayed there and I could have just kept, calling people and closing deals and I'd probably be making good money, but I was like, this isn't worth my peace. I'm not gonna sacrifice my peace for making money. And I'd already built good relationships inside of SubTo. And with Brad and Andrew, like I knew Andrew since like he literally joined SubTo. I'm pretty sure I was on like his first Zoom where he hopped on with the Houston crew ever in SubTo. So I built that relationship with them. I already knew Drew had some experience. I knew Brad was helping him out quite a bit, and I just hopped on. I said, "Hey, like I'm willing to make this work. I've learned a lot more about this industry. Like, let me help y'all out. What can we do?" And so I just started cold calling low equity sellers again, or low equity agents, and that's what I went through. And now I'm on the team. We've merged together with KJ and Joseph, and we've got like a team of probably like 30 people that, like we have setters where they're calling agents, they're, setting appointments for the closers to be able to explain what SubTo is. And then we have like a whole dispo team and two TCs on the back end. And it's still a good business. And the culture there is way better. Like it's actually supportive. I'm not being micromanaged on Zoom. But this is kind of the balance that you've got to play whenever you're looking at a team to join is, like, is this somebody I can stand behind and is this somebody that you can like? Because at the end of the day, like I would assume a lot of people don't want to sacrifice their piece for, a bigger paycheck. Some people are willing to do that. And it's a balance of figuring out where your right equilibrium is. It doesn't have to be perfectly 50-50. Sometimes people are a little bit more like, I'd rather make money. I'm fine like being a little bit miserable for more money. Other people are like, I'd rather just be a part of a great culture and I don't mind how much I make, you know, money wise. So it's a spectrum and you've got to kind of experiment. The biggest thing I would say if you are looking for a team is, I go back to myself, is just verify that like these are people who are actually doing deals. Like hut up or shut up. You've got to actually, be able to show that you're producing deals. What does your systems and your management and like the processes and the day to day in your business look like? Is it, like you're sending everything just through email, everything's disorganized? Do you actually have like a centralized communication platform? Do you actually have like a standard operating procedure for like once I get a contract, then it goes here and then it goes here, and you're following everything step by step down a conveyor belt? And that will kind of be somebody's gut check of like, how systematized, how organized is this business? Because that's all it comes down to on like the technical side of it, is how streamlined can you make your processes? And then on more of like, you can call that like the hard skills side, and on like the soft skills side, you got to see like, okay, like what's it like day to day, on the phone with these people? What's it like whenever I make a mistake? Are they going to rip me to shreds if I make a mistake, or they're going to say, hey, like mistakes are okay, like this is how we're going to work through it? Is it somebody who's open to your feedback, or is it going to be somebody who's going to say, no, like I'm the owner of the business, this is the way that we've got to do it? um those would be the things that I'm looking at, is like, what is their hard skills, soft skills, balance look like? What's the culture? What's the amount of money potential event? Hopefully you find something that's both. But that's kind of like the Goldilocks zone, and you don't find a lot of those in the business. But that's, yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, what I tell most people too is it comes down to the fact that like we're on a mission, right? So you have to understand that we're here to win.
Mm-hmm.
Like you and I talked about that at Squad Up Summit in the hallway. Remember we were talking about setting the standard, holding the standard.
Yeah.
And I was teasing you a little bit, but Jada was like, "Oh my God, are y'all serious?" Like, yeah, in a way we are, right? Like if Logan and I were on the same team, we probably would have those conversations. We probably would get heated from time to time. Like it happens on every team.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you can understand that those people have your back and they're your ride or dies, I think, like you said, it's kind of more of a feeling than it is really, especially on the soft skills side, right? Like the hard skills
Mm-hmm.
side is pretty clear. Like if operationally it's a shit show, it's just a shit show.
Yeah.
You're not straightening it out. Like I was telling you before we started recording, like I'm doing an operations consulting gig right now for a company. And she's like, I help clean up 100 man teams. Cool. So why are we here?
Yeah.
So why do I have to come in as the independent third party with no access to anything, no understanding to anything, and then basically tell you what to do?
It's a great question. So what did you have to do?
I had to tell her to quit sending fucking emails. That was the first thing. Because I told her, she was like, I said, what is our agenda for this week even? I said, do you remember what email we had? Because we had like an 8-week tentative agenda planned out. And it's a 16-week contract. And I said, where the hell is that? She's like, oh, I forwarded it to you again. And I was like, I'm sitting here. I don't want to argue with her,
Mhm.
right? I don't want it to get worse than what it already is. But I'm also like, I don't have that. So now I'm going to have to go through my computer like tonight and dig and dig and dig and try to find that agenda. I have the agenda for the next week, but that only buys me 7 days, right? So you're trying to do things as low cost, which is one of the red flags to me on an operational standpoint. Like, if you're not willing to invest a little bit of money into your systems and your processes, she was worried about $23 a month for a G Suite account, and I was like, "Are you really worried about an additional $23 a month, or is there something else that's bothering you, right? Because like at the end of the day, if you're using shared drives, like I need to be able to upload the documents that I create for your company to a place that's visible to your entire team.
Mhm.
So like what's the real concern here? And she's like, well, we need a better project management software. Okay. Say that next time though.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the balance you've got to find, and it's difficult to find it. And I will say, like, even in an environment like SubTo, to find people who are established and who have been doing it for a while and have systems and processes and everything like that lined out. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that they haven't yet, but that's just kind of like the stepping stones that you've got to go through. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning your wheels with, something that's not all the way built out, that's still like somebody's trial run. That's what it is for everybody. You've got to start out, you've got to have the trial runs, you've got to go through and like actually realize the value of these things and how to actually systematize them. Um, but for somebody starting out, it just comes down to like if you want to join the best team possible, you've got to be worthy of being in the best team possible. You've got to be able to show people that you're worth it. And if you don't have the skills yet to show that you're worth it, you've got to have the mentality to be able to have these people believe in you. And then B, you got to be able to like the people. Like these are the people that you're going to be working with every single day. Like, is this somebody that you can get along with? And like you're saying, is it something where like I'm going to get onto you and this is going to be like me saying you suck, you don't do anything right, I'm going to put you down, that way I can feel better about my position? Or is it going to be like, hey, like it's my duty as your friend to just tell you that you're screwing up here and you're freaking screwing up here? There's a complete difference in those types of delivery, and it could be literally about the same topic, but it depends on what the motivation is behind it. You got to kind of learn to read people and what their true motivations are. Like, are they here to actually help you grow? Great. If they are, that's probably a good soft skills fit. Or if they're here just to make themselves feel good about themselves and be build up their ego, you're not going to last long because it's going to get annoying real quick.
Well, and the good news about it, when you do find a good team is they kind of help you going back to that shadow work idea. They
Mhm.
do help you through that kind of stuff. Like one of the things that's one of my big pet peeves is if I tell you I don't have the answer, you asking me the question again doesn't change the answer, right?
Yeah,
Like I always tell people, like, do you enjoy being asked questions you don't have the answers to? No, probably not. Guess what? I really don't enjoy it. So if I say I don't know the first time, like rephrasing it doesn't change the I don't know. And
exactly.
one of my JV partners and I had that conversation one time because she's much more the fact finder in this than I am. I usually find the leads, bring the leads in. And she's like, well, do they have this? Do they have that? Do they have this? And I was like, Amy, I don't know. Okay. I don't know. And I got like irritated and she was like, are you all right, dude? And I was like, all right, look. So, and like you said, like when for me, when I was a kid, it was my dad. My dad would grill the shit out of us because he was a cop. Like that was what he did.
Mhm.
He'd ask you like, well, why didn't you study enough? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you raise your hand if you didn't understand it? Why didn't you ask questions? And it's like that. I don't know. Okay. Like I got a 60 on the test. That like no matter how many questions you ask me now, it doesn't change the 60 on the test. The
Yeah.
only thing I can do is tell you that I'm going to try to do better and or that I need help now.
Mhm. You're right. I mean, understanding yourself is paramount in order to be able to like actually communicate with others. You got to understand your own tendencies, how you're going to show up. That way you can communicate that to others. That way they understand why you're acting the way that you're acting. 100% the shadow work's valuable there.
Yeah. And I think it's also understanding that if you're around driven individuals, that they're going to want to win. And a lot of times people that are driven are fucked up. It's just what it is.
Definitely. I mean, pain is a bigger motivator than gain a lot of the times, and you got to have something to to run away from, and also something big enough that makes you want to run towards it. And that's what it is. Like I was saying with sales, you've got to be some degree of crazy to have people tell you no, 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 and you just still want to show up with the same tenacity on the next phone call and ask somebody if you want to buy their house, or ask somebody if they're willing to take this low ball offer on their house, or ask somebody if they're willing to do this weird structure where their name still stays on the mortgage and all this other stuff. You've got to have some degree of like being able to just be obsessed or be delusional about how you're going to make it work. Otherwise, it's it's just not for you. And there's nothing wrong with it not being for you. You just got to go find your other thing that you're going to go through that's going to be aligned for you.
Yeah,
I think
that
that's a
is most definitely for you.
yeah.
Because, like you're saying, like we raise capital. People think that I'm nuts because I ask them sometimes for up to like 100 grand of their own hard-earned money. But it's like I don't think that much of it because it's either you see it's a good deal, you can do the math, like I can do the math, or you don't.
Yeah,
It's one of the two, right?
exactly. Exactly. And it's a degree of shamelessness as well. I feel like in addition to you know the I don't know what to call it, like the relentlessness, and being able to be fucked up enough to just be like relentless and ask, like, do you want to lend $100,000 on this deal to multiple people and ask them for that much money? If you get caught up on what people think and you're a huge thermometer and you're letting that screw you up, you're just that's gonna just sabotage you in your success.
I saw Sharon flash a smile. She's fucked in the head too, I'm sure. Look at her. She's nodding. She's like, yeah, she does it all day too. She's a closer,
Yeah.
from Astro. So
Mm-hmm.
it's it's not easy. But like you said, it's either you see it or you don't. And if they don't, then you just go on to the next person because eventually you're gonna find the person that jives with you, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
for us, it's always just like, look, dude, the returns are the returns. Like the numbers are what they are. And I'm sure you probably have a similar mindset in some sense to closing, right? Like you either see the value in it, like I'm saving you capital gains, I'm you're getting monthly payments, you'll be cashed out in X amount of time, or you don't. And if you don't,
Yeah.
then cool, on to the next house.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a lot of times too, especially we're doing a lot of low equity deals still. It comes down to like if it's a house with a 6.75% rate, like no, like you're not going to get paid your full commission. No, your seller's not going to walk away with $20,000. Like, sure, you got offered that from somebody else who just learned something off of YouTube. Maybe they heard Pace talk, maybe they heard somebody else talk, and like were able to say like this is what I'm going to offer you, but it's not a legit offer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to waste your time with them, like be my guest. But I'm telling you, like, hey, like my offer isn't the best offer, but it's one that you can rely on. Would you rather waste your time and cross your fingers that this dude's able to pull his pants up, or would you rather just work with somebody who says, hey, like I know this isn't what you want to hear, but this is where I'm at. And if it's a no, great, on to the next one.
Yeah, that's a good point. My buddy who's a unicorn agent called me about that the other day. He's like, this dude called me and he wanted to do a bond for deed for like 0.85% interest. He's like, is that a SubTo guy? And I was like, probably not, bro. Like, probably not. I have a feeling that he probably went to YouTube University and he thought he could handle it. And, he just gave you an insulting offer that you're now going to look down on the community for.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think there's, you're always going to have, weeds in the garden. And I think right now it's just like something that agents got to get used to just on like the creative side as well. Like pace hasn't completely uprooted the entire industry and made it, normal for these type of transactions to go on. And so naturally, you're just going to have to deal with people that are inexperienced until more people just know about it outside of the investor sphere. But I mean, that's just the way it is. Like the dude's just completely flipping the industry on its head on how it's going to be done. Like, give it another 5 years. I'm sure SubTo is going to be way more commonplace. You're not going to be going, oh, what's SubTo? This is so weird. Like, it doesn't make sense. I've never done one of these before. Like, given
It's
where the market's probably going
illegal.
to be, yeah, or it's illegal or anything, man. And it's just a rite of passage. But in the meantime, as a closer, you've got to be able to navigate and scorch the earth in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just have to understand that you're like you're saying, your circumstances are not favorable for anybody right now, whether you're a closer and you're facing trying to lock up a house that has a high interest rate, or if you're trying to buy the house from the wholesaler. The dispo people are going to struggle to dispo it. The investors are going to struggle to buy it because PML interest rates are up right now too. Like everything's up.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to be smart with your numbers and with your strategies and understand exactly what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah. It's just about being selective and saying no, too, not just saying yes to everything.
Yeah, which goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, like keeping those promises to yourself, not necessarily overcommitting, not over promising and under delivering.
Yeah. That's a big thing, too, is the overpromising, under-delivering for sure.
If somebody wanted to become a closer, what would you tell them?
What would I tell them?
Yeah. Somebody just joined, maybe they're in Astro, maybe they're in Gator, maybe they're in SubTo. They're thinking about joining a wholesale team. They want to become a closer.
Ask them why. Why do you want to become a closer? Because I think that's the biggest thing. You got to be able to have some degree of fucked up in the head in order to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what I usually end up asking them is like, I try to find out what their superpowers are, right? Because, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't talk to people on the phone easily, if you're not somebody that likes to make calls, like it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be an uphill battle, and it might be a futile battle at that too.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, if I had somebody go up to me and like tell me that they wanted to be a closer, I think if I really wanted to help them out the most and really see if this is something that like they're going to be aligned with, I would give them all the reasons on why they wouldn't want to be a closer.
I was gonna say
And
you're
if they
gonna
could,
try to scare them out of it.
yeah. And if there's still somebody who's there that's like, like, yeah, like I'm cool with it, not knowing how much I'm going to get paid, not knowing, if somebody's going to say yes, sucking at, like, how to navigate conversations, being in uncomfortable conversations, getting cursed out all the time. Like, yeah, like it's still something that I want to do. I'm like, okay, like you're, you made the cut.
Well, would you say, because I find this is common in a lot of business owners, myself included, would you say that it was almost the ignorance that like led you into it in the first place? Like if you'd have known better, you probably wouldn't have done it.
100%. 100%. I did not know anything whenever I was first starting out. Like it took me like 3 months to figure out what earnest money was. Like seriously, I couldn't figure earnest money out. And I was just like, I know that there's something behind this. I know I can like buy a house and sell it for more. I'm just gonna go for it. And I almost wish that I could like have that same level of ignorance because there's a lot more that goes into it than what I was expecting in the beginning. But sometimes that's your best ally, is just being able to be there and just show up day after day and be willing to learn and be a sponge. Like that's a superpower that you've also got to have. And that's not even closing. That's just being an entrepreneur in general. Is just something that's I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah. It's the relentless pursuit of figuring it out too, because like that's one of the reasons I really like Tim Grover's content the most. One of the things he said recently is, there's one fundamental difference between people that are normal and people that are driven. And that's that the people that are driven are broken. And not just like in the terms of like the shadow sense, they just don't have an off switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to learn how to install that off switch.
Yeah, but for some people it also just never comes, right? Like that's why you see guys like Tiger Woods end up in the news.
I haven't been keeping up. Why did Tiger Woods end up in the news?
I mean, that was a long time ago, but he he couldn't turn off that competitive drive. He ended up, he had his wife found out he had like 13 girlfriends. He was just living like this whole double life, and one of them ended up chasing him, I think, and smashed his rear glass out at a golf club with
Dang,
a driver.
what? That's wild. So,
Yeah,
dang. I mean, that's crazy. I didn't know that about Tiger Woods.
a lot of those all-stars like at that level, they're all that way. Like they are so fucked in the head and they are so competitive that they try to compete even in the wrong arenas, even in
Mhm.
arenas where there is no competition and collaboration is required, i.e.
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, dark side of that aside, I think that that's kind of like the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is that it is an opportunity for the people who just don't fit in with regular society to be able to like actually make a difference. And it's almost ironic about like the people who are the most like screwed up in the head have like the highest earning potential because that's what it comes down to is like this is something that I've also realized through it is like I was really obsessed with real estate in the beginning, and I'm trying to figure out like what it is that I'm like actually obsessed about, and trying to pinpoint it. That way, I know for like the rest of my life, like this is the thing that keeps me going because that's what you have to be able to find is like the ability to not want to turn the switch off because you're going to be competing with other people, whether you like it or not in entrepreneurship, that are going to just show up and do it because like they can't turn it off whether it's because of insecurity, whether it's because of like passion, both, whatever.
But I think it also goes back to what we said earlier too, right? Like most people don't show up with any level of consistency, and it's understanding that you're competing against both. So you have to show up every single day as if you cannot turn the off switch off. Because if you can stand the test of time, everybody else is too busy flipping that switch and they're out.
Yeah, and that's all business is it's how long can you stay around. It's how long can you outlast your competitors? How long can you like innovate past the other people? That's all the game of business is. You can just still show up and just still be there even whenever you're just getting punched in the face. If you're still able to make ends meet, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, is like we said earlier, just figure it out.
Exactly. Exactly.
What problems can you solve? Because ultimately that's what you get paid for is solving problems.
That was another thing. I wish like somebody went to me whenever I was 12 and told me that business was about solving problems and not about just making money. That paradigm shift is such a huge one because you realize that like, oh, like yes, like the point of business is to make money, but the way you do it has to be through solving somebody else's problem. That's the only way somebody's going to be able to invest, their money and their energy into that.
Yeah. And I like how Andy describes that too, because what he talks about is like everything is a problem, right? Even like fitting in and feeling cool is a problem. That's why Louis Vuitton exists. Like, does it solve a practical problem? No, but is fitting in and feeling and having that status symbol, is that a problem to solve? Yeah, it is. So you just have to solve it and you have to solve it better than everybody else.
Yeah. Or see solutions that other people don't see. Um, yeah, no, I mean it's trying to think about how to like put this thought together. If you got something you can say it, I'm trying to like piece pieces together right now.
Well, I think that's kind of the good thing about you is you ask a lot of good questions. So I can tell you think about a lot of things because I do the same thing. I'm always thinking about it differently. And it was the same thing like in that ops consulting, right? Like I told her flat out, I was like, you need to do this. And she's like, I don't know why I didn't think of that. I said, because you're too close to it.
Hmm.
Sending 27 emails a week is not how you get things done.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like, I'd rather have a group chat that we check 27 times a day than have to go dig out emails. That's not efficient.
Yeah. It's like, like leaving the kitchen dirty whenever you have roommates, or leaving like plates out, in the sink. You don't see your own mess, you only see other people's messes. It's the way that, our ego works.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because I think too that goes back to like, in your mind, you justify it. You're like, well, I was gonna get to that. Well, yeah, bro, but fucking everybody says that. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's not about like Vince Lombardi says it. It's not like leading by example is not a way to lead. It's the way to lead.
100%. 100%. And I think it's also cool that like entrepreneurship and sales and being a closer, or whatever you want to throw in there, it's not about like what skills can I add in order to be a more functional person. It's like, how can I see the things that are like already screwed up and just become a less dysfunctional person? That's really what it is. It's not just adding stuff, it's taking stuff away.
Yeah. I think Ryan Holiday said something about that on Chris Williamson's podcast too. Like he looks for people that are at least screwed up in the head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how much stuff can you like sort through and like figure out like, oh, like this is a regular human tendency. Well, that doesn't serve me well. If I want to be consistent and scalable, how do I work through it? Um, I do have like an unrelated question though, or I
What's
mean,
that?
it is related. But what do you think money actually is?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the context in which you're discussing it. I think it's an exchange of value. I think it's a tool. I think it's an amplifier. I think it's a flow, right? Of time, money, effort, energy. I think it's a lot of things beyond just paper or numbers on a screen, right? Like
Mm,
if you're an asshole without money, guess what? You're a bigger asshole with money.
yeah.
If you have a lot of money, you probably solved a lot of problems, or somebody else solved a lot of problems and you were given a lot of money.
Mhm.
Like there's doesn't seem to be much of an in between. It's kind of I don't want to say it's binary because it is and it's not, right? Like it at this point in the game, it literally is numbers on a screen. Like most people don't even carry cash anymore.
Yeah.
So it's becoming almost like more binary. Um, but I think it's a tool. It definitely doesn't solve any of the deep work. I know people that have no money and are happier than people with money, and I know people with money that are happier than people without money. Um, I definitely don't think it is anything close to what we were told it was growing up. I think there's a lot of propaganda out there about money. Um, and I think, it's okay to have it at the end of the day. It's
Mhm.
okay to have it and it's okay to not have it. Like you are who you are. And money can be gained and lost, but at the end of the day, time can't. And no amount of money on the planet, even Steve Jobs has said he would give every single thing he had just for more time.
Yeah. That's the thing we all take the most for granted too. Um, is our time, for sure. It's interesting because I've been wanting to go through. It's like people will budget out their money in order to like save it, but like, how do you actually like budget out your time? Like, I'll plan my day every day and like go through and follow and try to follow it. But it's like, how well do I actually follow it? Like, where do I have like these minutes slip away, and why am I not treating time as my most valuable resource? If it actually is, like, I believe that people will say that, but it's like, do you actually budget your time? Do you actually like track where it goes if it is your most valuable resource?
I mean, I do. I don't think everybody does. I think time is hard, and especially as an entrepreneur, because like you don't really realize how precious it is until you overload yourself. And the only thing that's harder to get back than time, or that you have even less of than time, is bandwidth, right? Like everybody talks about working 16 hours a day, but if you've ever read like the 80/20 principle, especially the one that Perry Marshall wrote on sales and marketing,
Mhm.
you understand what Pareto's principle is, and you understand that like 20% of the work you do produces 80% of the results. And so most people out of an 8 hour workday have one productive hour every single day. And that one productive hour, if they could duplicate it, is worth like 3 grand an hour.
Yeah.
But similar to what you were saying earlier about the peaks and the valleys and the dips, and then the summation of that, you get paid on what the mean of what you produce is. And so most people get paid 60 grand a year, even though their top productive hours worth 3 grand an hour. Why? Well, because they do fuck all the other 7 hours a day. And 7 hours a day multiplied by five days a week is 35 hours a week. So you're telling me you have 5 really good hours and 35 shit hours where you're scrolling Facebook at your desk, or you're, playing mobile games on your phone when your boss isn't looking. Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what are you gonna, like, how do you expect anything to be different?
Yeah. And that's the harsh reality that you got to look at with this stuff, is you think that you're using your time in the right way. You think you're being productive. You think you're doing it. But once you take an actual honest look at it, you're like, oh, this is where my stuff is going. Um, it's true though. Another thing I've been looking into, like on like the whole like 80/20 principle, like using your time wisely. Like obviously you want to maximize your time on your 20%, that produces 80% of the result. Like where can I like grab the handle in order to get the most leverage on this thing? But another thing I've been looking into is also flow state and peak performance. I think that is super interesting. And I found a dude. Do you follow Rian Doris on YouTube?
No, I've read Stephen Kotler's books before though on
So
flow.
he's Stephen Kotler's business partner.
Okay, that makes sense. I've taken nootropics before in the past. There's one I don't think that Kotler used or endorsed, but it was very similar to what they were doing, called Qualia by Neurohacker Collective. And actually right now I've been taking Thesis, which is similar.
Hmm.
Not the same, but similar. Um,
Do you find like they have like a like what do they feel like? I've never taken them before, so I'm interested.
I think it just depends. I think every peak performance thing that you can use is a tool, just like money is, and everything makes you feel different. Like when I was on Qualia, there's times that it you go through the entire range of emotions. Sometimes you feel elated, sometimes you still feel really down. Some days you feel really angry and you're ready to run through the brick wall and solve all the problems and destroy anybody that gets in your way. Like these are all realities. Um, so it just depends, and that's the hard part about playing around with flow states and nootropics and peak performance is you experience it all, the highest highs and the lowest lows, and um, it can be exhausting and it can wear on you, and you can become a little bit of an asshole if you're not careful.
Yeah. I
Or
haven't even
more.
like Um, I haven't looked into like taking stuff though. I've just looked into just like the actual like flow cycle stage of it. That's something else like I like was reminded of whenever I was running the 18 miles was what a flow state like actually felt like. I realized I hadn't been in flow in so long, and it was like I was running like it had been like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I got to like the first aid station, and I was like, oh, like it feels like I've been running for like 30 minutes. Doesn't feel like I've been running for that long. Meanwhile, I'm like already 9 miles into the race or something like that. And I was like, geez, like this is crazy. And I keep running, and like next thing you know, like the race didn't feel like 4 hours. It felt like maybe like an hour and a half. And it's like the whole like your perception of time shrinks. And I'm like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to like feel like whenever I'm in my work.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and it's very difficult to have the discipline, at least starting out, because I'm still like really new to looking into this as well. But to have the discipline in order to like have like the right triggers for your brain to be able to drop into that flow state and actually like sustain it and stay there. Because the first stage of it is struggle. Like you're gonna struggle, and a lot of people just like get stuck in the struggle phase. But eventually, after you push through it enough, you're able to drop in the flow after that.
Well, and flow triggers are just like anything else. It's just like caffeine. You build immunity to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, again, different emotional states can trigger different kinds of flow states too. Like I used to push a little bit harder through some pain in my workouts. But at the end of the day, too, you have to understand that like you just have to have the discipline to show up whether you feel like it or not. And sometimes having a little bit of a chip on your shoulder is a good thing, and sometimes it's not. You know, you can definitely be too hard on yourself and you can just want to lay in bed the whole day, and clearly that's not good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just finding that balance. Like there's times where I feel too stressed and too anxious, and there's times that I feel there's times where I feel like too too angry or irritable, and a lot of times that has to do with our own like nutritional deficiencies as well as things that like sleep deprivation. And so like you were saying, when you feel that way, like you go lay down and meditate, sometimes I'll just take a nap in the
Yeah.
middle of like is it the most productive thing I could do in that moment? On paper, no. In practice, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of entrepreneurship that a lot of people leave out is your health and like your body side of it. Is that you get I feel like this whole like, I get 3 hours of sleep, I work all day. I feel like that gets overshown in entrepreneurship. And yes, like hard work is important. Yes, you should like be driven and like be able to find like where you don't have that off switch. But
Mm.
the off switch is there for a reason. Your body needs to recover. And if you feel like shit, you're gonna work like shit. If you have brain fog, you're not gonna be able to think through things. And I think it's a big thing that a lot of people leave out is like, do you actually just like take care of your human needs before you take care of your business needs? Or do you at least take care of both? Because at the end of the day, like you want your business to be a machine, but whether you're in your business or not, unless until AI takes over the world, it's built on the back of humans.
Yeah,
So the human aspect of it is just got to be there.
it does. And I think that's the beauty and the downside of it is like you could still be working at 10, 11 o'clock at night. It's your business. Like there's nobody there to tell you no. So have I tried to push through the brain fog and the fatigue and the stupidity way too many times? Yes. Has it got me hurt literally every single time, both physically, emotionally, mentally? Also, yes.
Yeah.
Um, it's just finding that balance and knowing it comes down to having a level of self-awareness that sometimes you possess and sometimes you don't. And, you know, you just have to realize that certain things are going to get hurt in the process, and you have to know how to fix them too.
Yeah. It's the whole like thermostat thing. Do you
Yeah.
know if pushing yourself all the way to this limit is actually like is the juice worth the squeeze, or are we just gonna go slam back, after 5 days of nonstop grinding and be like, why am I not just an absolute machine working 24/7? And it's like, well, it's because you're not.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing, like you brought that up earlier about how did you say it? I'm trying to remember. But in short, like, like your relationship's never gonna be perfect. Work is gonna get in the way of that.
Mhm.
But you and your girlfriend have to be on the same team and realize that like you both want to win and you want the relationship to win, whatever that looks like, you know.
Yeah.
And
It
we try not to bring work home and we try not to bring home to work, but it still happens sometimes.
it does. It does. And you know, entrepreneurship, I think a lot of people, I know me in like the beginning, I really associated it with just business. But really it's like a whole state of being. It's your business, it's your relationships, it's your health. It's it's all of the aspects of yourself, your mind, body, and your soul. put together into one because it is an identity, and that's the only way your identity works is, amalgamation of those three things. And that's, I think, what a lot of people don't realize going into it is they think, oh, like this is just like my business gig, but then you realize like, oh, like this business is way harder than I thought. Oh, that means that I'm going to have less time for personal things. Oh, I'm like pissed off because, like XYZ happened in my business and it all rests on my back. And I think
Yeah.
that's why a lot of people fail. But, I think it comes down to a degree of self-awareness to know whether or not you're cut out for that. Because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people think they are and they end up realizing that they aren't.
That's true too. There's a whole lot of people that take things the wrong way, like I'm rather direct and not everybody can handle that. And if I get to a point where we're hanging out and it's like, cool, this is becoming a waste of time, like I'm just sitting here just to sit here, like I'm leaving. And guess what? Every now and then I get that text like, hey, were you mad? No. Why'd you leave? Because I felt like leaving.
Right.
Like, yeah, but you were quiet the whole time you were here. Like, we didn't talk. Like,
Yeah.
what do you want me to do? You know what I mean? Eh, like I've got a hard and fast rule at this point. Like, I don't go to things I'm not directly invited to. This whole like, oh, the whole family's invited? Like, no, it doesn't, that shit doesn't fly here. I've had the same cell phone number since I was like 21 years old, since I was your age for the last 10 years. Even if you don't have the money to squeeze it in the budget to send out a formal invite by fucking carrier pigeon or snail mail or smoke signal or whatever, I am just as accessible to everybody. I make myself equally accessible to like anyone, whether it's family or friends or whatever. Like you can send a text, you can pick up the phone and call.
Yeah. I think that that's another thing that entrepreneurship teaches you because that is like your filter. That is your standard operating procedure is that I don't go to things unless I'm invited to them. And just going back to the whole like entrepreneurship is an identity and a lifestyle thing is that what I've realized too is that like the best principles in business and the best like systems in business are ones that you can apply outside of business. That's how you know like they actually have some good like meaty truth behind them because they're effective outside of in all different environments.
Yeah. They're applicable no matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're living in the mountains, hunting and foraging, or if you're just going on a date. Like one way or another, it literally is, and you don't realize this until you're further along the journey, but it is how you do one thing is how you do everything. Because those guiding principles, those guiding values are always the same.
100%. I mean that's the best way to put it. It's everything that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, man. Well, and like I said, like that's why it's not for everybody, but I think that's one of those things that you start to learn the longer you're in it, the more you start to distill down what those core values are and the things that you are willing and not willing to do.
1,000%. It's setting up personal boundaries, becoming less dysfunctional, like the whole nine.
Yeah. And just becoming more self-aware.
That's what I really feel like it is a game of. It's a game of just like using psychology in general, using your own and using other people's psychology to the highest level.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading $100 million offers right now, and that is a whole lot about psychology. Like that same lesson that Pace gave us about the SubTo fund and how many people literally tried to get in at the last minute. Guess what? That is applicable across every business, across every industry, across e-commerce, products, services, information, investments, doesn't matter. It's like, and I could hear it in Pace's voice, the level of frustration that he was expressing because he's like, I don't want to have to express to you like the fear of missing out and that level of negativity, but clearly you don't understand it anywhere else. And it's like, well, Pace, I love the positivity and I love that you want to bring that to the world, but also like human nature is human nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like it's the only way to sell is to, be able to be a good marketer is to be able to create those emotions inside of people,
Some level
you
of
know.
scarcity, urgency, some kind of fear of missing out. Um, Even if it's one of the things that Hormozy used that I think Pace would probably see as like a good lesson is the fear of missing out can also just be the fear of missing out on like bonuses and stuff. It doesn't always have to be like, oh, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, it's never coming back. It's like, oh, you don't get these things if you don't do it right now, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Because he said that point before on Family Night too. Like, not every positive story has to be like overtly rainbows and unicorns and fluffy cows and whatever. Like, sometimes a good positive story is something that starts out a certain way and then it ends with you learning the lesson and overcoming the objective.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Like being able to find the silver lining, and even if it's not overtly positive, like you're saying, like there's sunshine and unicorn. So, okay, give me an example of one of these in your life.
What's that? Like one of those stories?
Yeah, like where do you see that actually like playing out? Where like not everything is just like this huge, like massive, like David versus Goliath win.
I mean, I think everything in entrepreneurship is that way. Um, Specifically, like one of the things that I did in SubTo a while back was I had seen that entrepreneurship was making a little bit of a shift. And so I made the same post in the group that I had given to you in the chat, like, look, man, like I see where you are. I know it because I've been there. I understand it. Um, I know what it's like to feel alone. I know what it's like to feel like you've been kicked while you're down. And like I empathize, right? But I'm not sympathizing with you. I'm not like just I'm not giving you this level of like pity. Like the way I see it is like sympathizing is usually people that just kind of like look down on you and they give you that level of like validation that you're not looking for. Whereas like if I can empathize with you, that's more like I'm sitting on the floor with you and I'm like, hey bro, I get it. Like I've been there and I've done it. And so that was one of the things I had done in there was I was like, look, if you're an entrepreneur and you're feeling this way, I want you to reach out because I've been doing this now for 13 years. I've been an entrepreneur since I was like 19.
Mhm.
And I've had more failures than I've had successes. There's a lot of things that I did that people laughed at me for. Some of them still laugh. Like I was picked on as a kid. Like I understand all of those things. I understand all those emotions. I understand the level of self-doubt and the negative self-talk that goes on inside your head. And so all I try to do is I try to tell people that they're not alone in that. And that if they have my cell phone number, they know how to get me.
100%. And that's one of the things I appreciate about you, Adam, is that you're so raw and real with it. It's not, oh, I'm crushing it. I'm crushing it. I'm crushing it. I'm crushing it. It's like sometimes it's crushing you, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
And sometimes that's an hour by hour basis of the day too. You just never know.
yeah, I mean, you never know, but I mean, it's either like the way that I see it is like you either are willing to put up with, you know, it crushing you with getting punched in the face, getting told no, not having everything lined up, having people churn through your business, having, whatever it is. And it's either you're going to struggle here or you're going to struggle in life by just going through and getting a regular job. Like that's the trade off you make with entrepreneurship is your day to day is extremely difficult and tough in return for the massive upside of, eventually after you've been punched in the face enough, like it all becomes worth it. But it's not until like you stay in the ring for 9 rounds and just get beat up and you're bleeding out where
Yeah.
it actually starts to pay off.
Yeah, you're going 12 rounds of Mike Tyson every single day.
Yeah, literally.
And I think that's actually probably a good point that we're going to start to wrap it on. Do you have any final thoughts on this one, Logan? Any
No, I mean,
thoughts to the aspiring closers?
to the aspiring closers, to the aspiring closers, it's like just stick with it. If it's something that you really want to do, like you'll see that you're crazy enough to be able to do it. And if you feel like you're crazy enough, you probably are. And it's just a matter of sticking through it and learning and just being able to be coachable, a sponge, and realize that it's a never ending cycle, you know, and you've got to just learn self discipline and mental toughness. It's a great method to be able to do it, but you've got to be with it enough. You got to be committed in order to do it. That would be my message to any aspiring closer.
I think that's a good one to go out on too. So, guys, y'all know we do these every single Sunday. You're welcome to show up. You're welcome to bring your questions. As y'all know, it gets harder and harder to market these. So, if we made you think, if we made you laugh, if we made you smile, if we brought you value, Logan knows the line. Don't be a hoe.
Share the show.
All right, guys. I appreciate everybody. We'll
Thank
see.
you both. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your commitment to the community and to everyone else on this call.